Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the launch of the ASU Engineering Professional Development Series. We're thrilled to have you here today as we kick off our quarterly webinar series dedicated to connect you with ASU faculty and industry leaders as they discuss their programs and industry trends. These sessions focus on professional growth and lifelong learning to help you stay ahead in the field of technology and engineering. Today's webinar, Mastering Change, Insights from Six Sigma Experts, will explore Six Sigma methodologies and provide you with practical tips and strategies to tackle inefficiencies and drive meaningful change within your organization. We should have a little time for Q&A at the end, so if you have a question, please submit it in the chat and we'll do our best to address those at the end as time allows. With that, let's introduce our panel. We'll go ahead and start with Clayton.
Okay. I'm Clayton Taylor. I'm the Director of Organizational Performance for Arizona State University. My team is a university-wide supporting unit that helps with strategic planning, process improvement, including things like Lean Six Sigma. We're here to help everyone do things better, faster, smarter, and deliver a better result to our community.
Kevin.
My name is Kevin Ingholtz, founder and CEO of Infinitum Health. I'm also a professor here at ASU. Been doing process improvement for the better part of 22 years. In multiple industries, Intel, Apple, Google, Mayo Clinic, banking. We'll have lots of diverse conversations from our background. So that's a little bit about me.
Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick Cunahan at Intel Corporation since 1997. I've been doing process improvement stuff at Intel for probably about 12 years now. I'm part of an organization called Flex, which is an internal consulting unit. And so one of the things that we support is Intel's Enterprise Six Sigma certification program. So yeah, excited to chat with everybody today.
Great. And I'm your host. I'm Eric Siebenek. I'm a performance improvement advisor over at the Mayo Clinic, and I'm a current black belt student here at Arizona State University. Let's go ahead and get started with some questions. Patrick, let's start with you. How do you mentor and guide green belts in your organization?
Yeah, thanks. So I think there are lots of different answers to that question. Like I mentioned, we in our group support Intel's enterprise-wide certification program. So we have students that come through for yellow belt, green belt, black belt, and master black belt. Sometimes those students have their own, or those candidates have their own projects already. Sometimes we have to help them find them. I think for me, the most important thing is to help them connect those projects and improvement ideas back to the business outcomes that they're looking to achieve. So maybe in another sense, not doing a certification project for the sake of doing it, but to really connect that back to what matters in the business, right? What business problem am I solving? So that's important, and lots of different ways to do that. But I think one of the most important ways is to continue asking questions, right? And whether it's something as simplistic as 5 whys, I really want to get to a clear problem statement that's well written and really helps me understand what's wrong, what's the impact, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think just briefly, that's the place where I would start.
As a follow-up to that, I know it's important to create a lean mindset within our culture at work. Are there any requirements for staff to get a green belt or a yellow belt within your organization?
Essentially just kind of manager approval.
Okay.
So we do have an internal bill back mechanism. So candidates would kind of pay for that training. Of course, no money leaves the company. So that's better, for Intel than purchasing it externally. And we do regularly benchmark our offerings, and we feel that they're very competitive and that our pricing is actually very good compared to what's out there for what you get. So yeah, it's essentially just manager approval, and overwhelmingly people's program or their certification projects are well aligned with the work that they're doing. So that generally is well received.
Great. Let's kick over to Clayton. What techniques do you use to identify root causes of complex process issues?
Well, it really kind of depends on what we're doing. A lot of the work that my team does is related in the service industry. So many of the tools that we're using are having to engage with people that aren't really collecting a lot of data. A lot of our processes can be somewhat manual, and we're having to collect data in small amounts. So we find that using kind of the standard cause and effects diagrams, C&E matrix really have been very useful in that realm. And of course in relationship diagramming. Those really are the ones that we go to when people are just using their subject matter experts. Still, whenever we can get data, my preference is to use things like regression analysis so that we can get a very clear picture of our continuous data and sort through, find the right factors that are really driving the process and seeing what's really causing or driving the root cause. But at the same time, then going to design experiments so that we can then optimize those numbers.
And Eric, if I can jump in on both of those. So how I like to mentor students as well as jump into complex projects. I think one of the first things I like to do is it's a bit of a classic technique of a voice of a customer. I'll ask the candidate, why do you want to do this, right? I mean, kind of get an understanding of their sense of urgency and sense of passion. Is it a mandated certification? Is it because they're going through a project they want to try and get through? That helps drive a lot of the conversation of how I'm going to guide them, how I'm going to mentor them. Is it a manager that said you have to do this, or is it because I desperately want to learn how to solve problems in the world? And that'll actually coach a little bit more on, okay, we're going to take on this type of problem, we're going to use these types of tools, because regression analysis to someone who doesn't want to learn regression analysis is really, really impossible. Mm-hmm. Regression analysis for someone who wants to learn how to solve a problem becomes so much easier, mm-hmm. right? Because then you can actually articulate, this is what this means to said problem. So for me, when I took about mentoring, I want to understand a little bit of the voice of the customer, but also understand, okay, what motivates them and what tools will help them really stick. Because like Patrick said, you don't want it to be a transactional experience. Project 1, Project 2, Project 2, you have Project 3, you have to make it an experience that lives on forever beyond the project. And that's a little bit how I help mentor as well as going after those complex projects as well.
Yeah, I agree that when you're looking at statistics, that can be a real problem for people. It can be intimidating, mm-hmm. Especially for people that are really not focused in mathematics. A lot of the training that we do here at ASU is focused on showing people more how to collect the data, get it into the right software, let the software do the work. And we tell them we're not here to make you a statistician. We're here to help you find a way to solve problems, and that usually helps, I think, set people at ease and help them engage better with some of the more complex tools.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can maybe add just one more quick thought to that. Yeah, so thinking back to maybe projects that I helped mentor with people maybe from HR or from an organization that's not science-based necessarily. Mm-hmm. I hope that they learn to recognize those types of things and when they're appropriate. And if I need to go ask for help, if I need to talk to my group statistician, great, right? Yeah. I don't necessarily have to know how to do it myself, but if I don't know that it needs to be done, then I feel like that's a bigger problem.
Absolutely.
So fully agree with both of you guys. Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. I think something you said a second ago kind of resonated with me. You talked about how in the lack of a data-rich environment, you rely more on the subject matter experts and do these kind of cause and effect analysis.
Right.
I often run into that. I know, working in healthcare, data are sometimes not good. Sometimes you don't have the right data, and sometimes that's siloed from department to department. So you have to rely on subject matter experts. So really appreciate that.
And when you are in a data starved environment too, sometimes you really just have to get your practitioners out there and get eyeballs on it, even if it's standing there with a stopwatch or a check sheet. And even if you're just collecting a little bit of data, there's things we can do in the non-parametric analysis world that will allow us to turn that into something useful. So there are ways that we can gather that and help support the discussions behind the subject matter experts.
How do you all feel about maybe delaying project progress so that you can prospectively collect some data? Because I know that being able to do a regression is infinitely better than just kind of going off qualitative observation.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about delaying projects? Sometimes it's win or lose. Sometimes you lose the attention of your project team, but you gain a lot in the process. So how do you guys feel about that?
I'll start us off and then maybe go in. So I think Patrick said it earlier, always tying back to the strategic objectives, always tying back to what our goal is. That would be the first question is are we able to delay? And then the second question is how much data do we really need? Yeah. A lot of times you don't really need a lot. I think a lot of times, especially in folks that are maybe just getting involved, or maybe they're getting an edict directive from their leader, you need thousands of data points. And you can come to a practitioners like us and say, well, you probably only need 30, let's go with 16. Right? And just kind of reiterate for the audience here, Jeff Bezos did 16 test flights on his rocket before he went. That's because of math, right? And because it was the highest yield of evidence to say that it's going to be safe to go up. That's a lot of times all you need. 30 would be ideal for continuous data, but going with a practitioner, when a lot of times leaders say, well, maybe we need to delay this project, I would validate what's the delay. Is it not tied to strategic objectives, or is it tied to I can't grab data? Well, there's lots of ways to get data, right? We can do lots of different ways to do it. Let's just make sure it's one, tied to the strategic objective, and two, if the data's cheap, let's go for it. If the data's expensive, let's tighten up the statistics, like a rocket ship that you only can do 16 tests, right?
Yeah.
If it's cheap, you can get it all day long. Right? There's lots of different ways to do it. So that's a little bit of how I interact with delaying is understanding the origin of why there's a delay and what we need to do. Always going back to strategic objectives, like Patrick said, and then saying, okay, what's the real data need here?
Yeah. Some of the tools are even robust at 5 data points, 10 data points.
Right.
So, there are ways to get what you need to make the decision. But even if you don't have the data, subject matter experts, they're going to be there. They've seen it. They've done it. They're pretty reliable as far as their assumptions and knowledge about the process.
Absolutely.
This one kind of ties in with that. How do you balance strategic thinking with hands-on project execution?
You know, start that one?
Kevin and Patrick?
Yeah. Okay.
I'll start. Yeah. So I think anytime you start, I think Patrick did talk about getting like a charter set up, walking new candidates or even executives. Sometimes executives don't want to see a templated sheet. So a lot of times I call it a verbal conversation. We kind of walk through where's your process start, where's your process end. How does this align to you, what you're trying to do as an executive? And I don't really say, what are your strategic objectives and be very mechanical. I just kind of have a conversation with them like you're having a cup of coffee. And in that conversation, you can drive out what really matters. What matters to you? I want agility. I want velocity. I'm like, what does that mean specifically? I need my coffee done in 2 minutes, 3 minutes? It's like, well, yeah, time. Yeah, okay. So it's time, right? And so you're kind of coaching them to a point and saying, how does time impact your overall goal as an executive or overall goal as a candidate? Well, it impacts this measure, this, right? And you're actually tying it for them. And then once you get to that point, they then, oh, I get it, right? And then you can really start pulling them down to where you want to go. And at the end of the day, coaching them back to saying, what is the overall goal of what you're trying to do? I think in a for-profit industry, you've got 2 goals. You increase revenue, decrease operating costs. Pretty simple, right? From there, it's all kind of noise. You got to kind of figure out what the objectives are. But if you're ever doing a project or ever doing an improvement effort that doesn't impact the overall goal of the organization, you should probably take a step back and say, what are we doing this for? Back to the delay conversations. I would kick that one off as a starting conversation, going back to what is the origin and really tying it to it. You get a lot of buzzwords, but then you have to kind of coach leaders back to like, what does this buzzword actually mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great insight, Kevin, to try to get to what are those outcomes that I care about. What are the metrics or indicators that help describe that, right? And maybe I'm not measuring the right ones today. And like your coffee example is easily relatable, right? So maybe I care about the quality of the coffee more than the time. I'd rather wait 5 minutes and have it be better. That's fine too, right? But if I don't think through that and really understand where I'm trying to end up, I probably won't get there.
I often find myself trying to drive questions towards the project team of why does this, or how does this affect your team, or why does this affect your team. Often gets to the right problem and helps to level set expectations for the project moving forward. Patrick, would you please share an example of a project where you had to navigate organizational politics to drive change?
Yeah, I actually have I think it's a good
How
example.
long is this webinar?
How long do we have?
Yeah.
Exactly. So an example that we had, I mentioned briefly that we're in an internal consulting organization where I am at Intel. And so we help different groups all across the enterprise in the kind of classical sense of consulting. And their money is transferred between the groups. So they're essentially hiring us to help with this work. And so we were doing essentially, I would call it like kind of a knowledge management, business process improvement activity for a group. The way that we support other groups across the enterprise, we're kind of like an external person, even though we're at Intel, right? I'm a permanent employee and we help them, but we're not from their team or their org. So it kind of feels like we're an outsider, which can be good or bad, right? Like sometimes it's great to have an outside perspective. Sometimes we can be seen as an other or, maybe a lesser or a greater, I don't know, right? That perception is that person's perception. But what happened was essentially there was a little bit of disagreement about who ultimately owned completing these process deliverables,
Yep.
right? So does Patrick own it? Does the organization own it? There was some back and forth about that. So my thought was that the organization owns their own deliverables, right? That ultimately they're responsible for making sure that that's successful, right? And maybe in the sense, if I were to hire an external contingent worker, right, that's like a staff augmentation role, okay, maybe they have a specific deliverable to create a document. but ultimately they don't own the business process. They don't own the success that's going on. So this was a director level person that we had lots of conversations with, and actually, I think it worked out really well. I learned some things along the way, and I think we eventually agreed that it made sense that the business owns those outcomes, and I truly believe that. So, it was a little contentious along the way, but everything worked out really well.
Kevin, great. I want to hear from you guys too on this one.
I got one. I've been talking planning.
I have to agree. One of the things that we often do when we're dealing with that type of thing is really do a deep dive on a stakeholder analysis.
Yeah.
The biggest thing you can do with a political situation or office politics is understand who the players are, what's really driving them, and then make sure that when you are engaging with them, that the communication that you're providing really goes to their kind of their key buttons, right? So you got someone who's really data oriented, then you're going to want to make sure you're presenting with lots of data. If it's action oriented, here's our action plan, here's how we're going to do it, and this is when we're going to do it, that type of thing. So that stakeholder analysis coming from the change management world is really critical, I think, in making a lot of this stuff happen.
I was going to say, a lot of things you guys are mentioning apply to skills when dealing with resistors. And you think about like ad card change management and dealing with those resistors. If you can get those resistors to flip, you really have a good advocate in your pocket to carry the process forward. Kevin, tell me something about this.
This webinar could go on for hours for all of us that have experience in this. I would say one of the things I like to manage, especially if I know the politics are coming. Sometimes you don't know until you start seeing the data, and then you got to get into it. If I know the politics are coming, stakeholder analysis is a good one. I think for me, I tend to be a little more informal. I usually just ask the leader that I'm involved in, because sometimes the leader is the biggest, resistor. Yeah. I just kind of ask, can you help me understand the political map? And again, I'm doing this kind of verbal consulting kind of thing. They're like, well, Jim Bob's, resistor, this one's a change agent, blah, blah. They give me kind of my own mental stakeholder analysis. I'm like, well, who's your worst candidate? Who's your worst person in your group that's going to be the biggest problem? Well, Jim Bob. I said, okay, can I go have coffee with Jim Bob? What do you want to do coffee with? He doesn't like statistics. I'm like, I just want to know about Jim Bob. I just want to talk to Jim Bob and learn about his family and the kids. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to meet with Jim Bob multiple times prior to it being a Kaizen event or a project start, whatever it is, so that when we walk in the door, everyone's nervous about Jim Bob, and then they see Jim Bob and Kevin hanging out, having a great conversation. I'm asking about how soccer went for the kids, etc. The entire emotion of the crowd goes down immediately. And I've maintained and what's called owning the crowd pretty quickly, and people recognize that the conversation is not going to be as stressful as they thought it was going to be. And a lot of times in Kaizen events, it's pretty powerful because they're typically political. But if you mitigate that risk and that nervousness of the one dinosaur, the one resistor ahead of time, early and often, just like you would do the communication plan, you get early and often for those resistors, the Kaizen or the process improvement effort becomes that much easier because the people around it have seen that, oh my gosh, if he can get on board, maybe I'll get on board. Right, so I think that's always been kind of a fun one for me. And I'll be honest, problems of the world really aren't that hard to solve. It's the people around the problems that you have to kind of find a way to do it. And that's one of the things I love about this stuff is you can statistics nerdery all day long. Let's hang out and talk about p-values. But until you find a way to change people's minds, you're not going to go anywhere. Right? I mean, that's what's really powerful about this stuff. It gives you the tactical tools to get there. But once you get to the bigger strategic efforts that change organizations and transform, it's all about people. And it's critical to understand that.
I like that tactic a lot. You get an advocate, a friend, and then your reputation goes up for future projects, help you carry forward. Yep. People have a little bit more trust in the work that you're doing. It helps things to move along a little faster. A less change management maybe needed next time around, right?
That's true.
How do you ensure that Lean Six Sigma methodologies are integrated into the company culture?
That one is, again, I think a big communication piece, right? You've got to get the leadership talking about it. You've got to make sure that there's conversation around it. That's one of the worst things I think can happen anytime you're trying to change your culture is for you to introduce something and then everyone goes silent. Because at that point, people don't see these ideas or these concepts or these changes as being relevant or important. And so it just kind of falls by the wayside. So that's one of the first things that I always work with teams on is if you're going to do this, you need to make sure that leadership is actively engaged and talking about it long term. This can't be just something you mention once or twice. It needs to be discussed in regular meetings and staff meetings, coaching, anything related to that, so that people know that, hey, this is important, and we want to build that into what we do. The other thing that you can do is build a community of practice around things. That's something that we've done here at the university, specifically around organizational excellence. And we've got a community here that is interested in it, and we use that to promote concepts, to get people talking and engaging in that. And we've seen over time that the more we offer through that community, the more people are talking about it. We're now starting to hear individuals bringing this up in meetings and then more in their regular thought process. So it's becoming ingrained in the work that they do. So really, when you're doing something like that, you have to have that conversation ongoing and let people know that it's important. So that's one of the key things that I've always done.
Yeah.
I think the center of excellence or community of practice is really powerful, right? We generally have a desire to belong, and that's a great place for me to go and ask questions or to share wins or struggles or challenges, right? And I would say, again, bringing it back to the change, like structured change management, right? Generally people don't enjoy being told what to do,
Right.
but if they see something that's successful and they can kind of copy that, then yeah, maybe that's a little more desirable, right? So sharing wins and even losses, right? That, hey, this didn't work out and this is why, and maybe I do it a little bit differently next time, and that's okay, right? We're not always going to be 100% successful, and that's an unreasonable expectation in my mind. So yeah, I think the COP is a really powerful tool to bring people together and share learnings and experience. I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah, sometimes you can just get people talking about it and sharing a common interest, it will build on itself.
Absolutely.
This is something I've been passionate about in my work. And we're such a large organization, it's really hard to kind of drive that culture forward. And what we've done, we've been working towards breaking down silos, geographical silos, and networking people together. And when you get them talking about projects, you find commonality in that passion for the work that we do. We all have problems in the work that we do from day to day, and we want to fix those things. And I feel like exactly what you say, sharing the positives and the negatives of the work we're doing really helps to drive culture forward. People see other people having positive experience and getting work done, improving their work. I want to do that too. Definitely helps me to propagate it within my own little bubble at work.
Yeah.
What continuous learning practices do you follow to stay updated with industry trends and best practices?
I'll start us off. I mean, I'm an avid reader. I don't know if that's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
It's one of those things where, my wife laughs. I'll have a Harvard Business Review on my desk. I'll have MIT Sloan Management on my desk. I'll have a Nature, a Science, Physics Today, and then I'll have Pink Pony and Unicorns Today, which is for my kids.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll have all these types of things. But I think what for me in terms of staying on top of that is having an ability to recognize basic industry trends. If you're watching Harvard Business Review and X's new strategic platform, or the CHIPS Act that comes out and impacts your economy, right? I think for me, how I stay on top of improvement stuff is not staying down at the tactical project level, but staying at more of an economic level, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is driving our economy, and what's gonna change that? Because that will actually drive the tactical projects and transformation efforts. So if we're going to electric, if we're going to solar, if we're going to these other things, how do you learn more about that, and how does your background actually apply to that? What's amazing for me is it applies everywhere, right? And again, going back to a cultural stick, right? Everything you're doing in this type of work can be used everywhere, not just as a project, but as a manager, as a leader, and wherever you're going, in literally every industry. So for me, as a bit of a student of or as a practitioner, I tend to stay more as an economic level and say, well, how could this be solved, right? Well, again, problems in the world aren't solved. It's the people around the problems, right? You look at world hunger. How do you solve world hunger? Well, there's lots of ways to do supply chain with potatoes, et cetera, blah, blah. It's an economic level. But how do you manage the influence of people and all the supply chain around it, right? So I think for me, how I stay abreast of some of those things and trends is I just look at the economic changes that are coming on the news and try and pull them down to say, okay, what is the measures or strategic objectives for these types of things, and how are they going to impact the countries that they're coming from or the industries they're coming from? And then you can start breaking it down to like what we do in our tactics and say, okay, well, there's a couple ways you can solve that, right? And for me, it becomes more of an academic exercise and mental exercise. It's like, okay, that's pretty intriguing. Maybe I want to do that, or maybe I'll do consulting in an industry for a year or something like that. Becomes kind of interesting and engaging. So for me, I at high level first, and then kind of bring it down to the tactics. At least that's how I stand.
You want to go on that one, Patrick?
Sure.
I've
Yeah.
got a list.
I
Yeah,
guess
me too.
I agree with what you said, Kevin. To me, like what I hear from that is the passion that you have for doing that, right? So the right way for me to stay engaged is a way that I'm passionate about, right? You know, and some people love to do benchmarking or, you know, industry comparisons. You know, I think being a lifelong learner is probably smart for everybody. And that looks very different for everybody, right? And I tend to be in a similar kind of mindset to you. I love reading everything I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't see right away how it's applicable, but it may be, right? Or maybe it sparks an interest. So I think that passion for it is really important because if I'm bored or if I feel like it's work to do that, I'm probably going to minimize that and try to avoid it. So
Yeah.
Excellent.
Same thing, you know, reading is probably one of my bigger methods for gaining new information and new knowledge. Starting to run out of books and spending more time looking at magazine articles and internet type things. But there are some good programs out there as far as additional continuous learning type things that you can see on LinkedIn Learning or YouTube, those types of things where you can actually see additional input from people and see how they're applying things. But I find, you know, as far as developing skills and furthering your ability to apply skills, looking at case studies and really seeing how others are applying it and understanding what their challenges were, what approach they took, what they learned from it, has been very valuable. And probably the biggest way that I find that I've improved my skills over time and continue to learn is to teach. You know, as you go out and start teaching these concepts to others, I know at, you know, at black belt level, master black belt level, that's kind of the expectation is that we're going to be teaching the individuals coming behind us. But that's even after, you know, more than 20 years in working in the Lean Six Sigma world, I still learn things when I'm in front of a class and someone says, I've got this idea or I've got this challenge. What do you think? And then your only response is, I have no idea. I've got to go learn something new too. And so that kind of interaction, I think, keeps me on my toes, keeps me in a constant learning mode.
Awesome.
And being able to take that and help them take it back down to the tactical level.
Awesome.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it was 8 years ago now. Kevin, you got me set up teaching at the Mayo Clinic, where I'm helping to guide doctors, nurses, allied health staff towards gaining this knowledge.
Wow.
That does definitely help me to stay relevant and current with the practices. Every morning when I start work, I'm filled with newsletters from Harvard Business Review, New England Journal of Medicine, several years. But that's very highbrow. What about some more lowbrow options? Do you guys follow any of the social media like Instagram, Twitter? Does that guide you at all in process improvement or guiding through new practices?
I personally haven't been following things like that, so that really wouldn't be a channel for me.
I think for me, LinkedIn, you had mentioned that's probably the most professional way I follow information on it. And a lot of it's fun. Like you said, 8 years. That's embarrassing. I didn't realize it was 8 years. But it's 8 years. All these other mentees that you have over the years, you congratulate them on LinkedIn and you check in on things.
Yeah.
I think LinkedIn's got some good articles on folks that talk about recent projects that they completed. Quite a few of us have seen the governments change. So Arizona state government, California, Colorado state government, a lot of them have instituted operational excellence programs to try and manage some of the bureaucracy and administration. So LinkedIn is really the only way I've been able to stay on top of those types of things. I think that I'm not really too much on the other social media avenues now. I just don't have a lot of time to keep up with it all. I try to. I guess I'm more traditional. As I get older, I get more and more like, we're the newspapers,
I would just add, from my role in this embedded consulting unit, I'm the service line lead for process improvement or operational excellence type work. And so part of that is listening to our customers, right? That what are the things that they believe they need, the skills or tools or whatever it might be, for them to enable the business outcomes that they care about, right? So all of those other avenues, absolutely love that. I love to learn and keep track of that. But I'm also trying to be listening and asking questions a lot as well.
Very good. Yeah. Are there any LinkedIn pages you would recommend following or?
Well, disclaimer: I don't own any of these pages.
Yeah.
I'm not promoting any of these pages. That type of thing. I mean, if you type in operational excellence, there's going to be a litany of them. And what I'd say is do your own best. There's some of them are a little like regurgitative of others, right? So I would try and find the origin of some of these ones. I would operational excellence. I like that term as more of an academic term because it's not lean, just Six Sigma. There's agile, there's just do it, there's the job to be done. I mean, there's 32 operational excellence methodologies. I think that's the reality is folks really don't really know that. 80-20, you hear lean, Six Sigma, business process management, and and there's a couple other job to be done, innovation methodologies. But there's lots to be learned from all of those methodologies. I think OpEx tends to be the best term I use to kind of search on LinkedIn. I think try not to be constrained in Six Sigma or constrained in lean. Government systems probably never heard of a p-value, right? Whereas in Intel and engineering systems, you're going to hear peer value all day long, right? And then you got the gamut of in between where you've got creative folks at like Apple that don't already know all that stuff and want to try something new. Like we got to do an innovation methodology called job to be done, or like trees, which is a very mechanical, algorithmic way of looking at innovation, right? There's a lot of times people don't really think about that. So I think OpEx is usually a good term to use to try and catch all some of these other ones that you have in here. So that's a little bit for me.
What critical changes must we make to face the future effectively?
Holy cow.
I know, this is a hard one. This is for everyone.
I think I'm going to go with the obvious, and something that I'm doing more and more, especially as we are, again, in that service environment, is embracing the technology, embracing AI and robotic process automation. Those are things that have been absolutely blowing up right now. I mean, everybody's really focusing on it. Every software package, every company out there is creating their own version of it. And really what it is, it's all coming down to data management. I mean, that's what AI is. How do we collect enough data so that the computer can go through and make sense of it? So we really, from a process improvement, organizational excellence standpoint, we've got to start embracing that and, realizing that it's very much a tool. I know that there's some fear around this replacing people. It will replace some of the work that we do as far as analyzing operations, analyzing process, and giving us information. But it's not going to replace the individuals doing the work. It's really going to be a very powerful tool. And things like robotic process automation, that RPA, being able to set a computer loose and let it watch a process, analyze it, give you a process map and work breakdown on what's happening, times, the different methodologies that people are using, and do that in a matter of minutes or hours, watching a process versus something we do manually. It's going to save us a lot of time and give us the ability to, I think, give us more capacity to help our organizations. So that's really what I see.
Yeah. We're definitely in the beginning stages of all of that. I know, garbage in, garbage out. AI hasn't historically, in the last year, I would say it's growing, but it's dealing with data that are imperfect and having to interpret those models for the computer to analyze has been one of our challenges. I know significant challenges in operationalizing these like risk care models that we develop, or trying to figure out, where your bottlenecks or constraints are with these AI models. Really got to work on the data on the front side first.
Yeah, and it's going to get better over time. They really are something that are going to change and shift. The more they're used, the more information they get. Absolutely, they will get better. But beyond that, like I said, I'm really looking at it as more of a tool that can, as they get better, help us do the analytics work and take the manual work off of our shoulders, and really start feeding us the correct information that we can use for decision making, and then start moving more towards how do we actually make these improvements.
You got one? You want me to go?
Oh, please.
I'll add two pieces to this one. I can't agree more. I'm going to add to Clayton's comment. So Infinitum Health is a medical products company that I created not because I have a background in biochemistry, but because I have a background in operational excellence. So it's largely a mathematical company based on design of experiment in a very manual way of capturing data from passive research data and then putting it into a model and then saying, okay, this could be a product. This could be a product. These extracts, these p-values peaking. With the advent of AI, that becomes much more automated than what I had to do manually, right? And I think that's critical being able to take that AI information and take it to multiple industries, not just the one that I did or other ones that are in there. The other piece to that is to sustain it, is to be able to manage the disruption it's going to have. If you truly have a new innovative way of doing it, the public may or may not want that disruption, right? And that tends to stop a lot of things. So that'll be another kind of hiccup that you have to kind of manage, is you can get the technology there, but you also have to get the people. Again, I keep talking about the people piece, trying to get them there. Okay, but this didn't come from a doctor, right? Or this didn't come from a classical engineering methodology, or this didn't come from a biochemist, right? So that's something that you have to kind of add to your change management strategy, is the marketing of it and that type of thing. So I think AI is huge. The correct use of AI in a field that doesn't fear it, right? I think we've got a little bit of a fear of AI. I think if you direct it in the right way, you're going to be in a good spot. The second one I was going to talk about is the robotic automation. So at Wells Fargo, we did a gig at Wells Fargo, automated lots of banking processes, which are great. I think one of the biggest things, and I've done it in years past, where you always kind of go into a process and system and kind of ask why you're doing this. I couldn't see it more often than not in banking, that we do a lot of manual processes, but we never ask the question why we're doing them at all, right? Yeah, we need to automate. Hold on. What are we doing here? Like, what's the objective of what we're trying to do? Well, we don't want to outsource. We can automate, blah, blah. Okay, well, why are we doing this? In a quick example, we had investment bankers. Every 2 weeks, they had to do at least 200 reports to a separate SEC organization. No one ever asked why we do those reports. It was one manager before them added 10 more reports. Another manager after that added 10 more reports. Now you got this ballooning report for these very expensive investment bankers. Well, yeah, we need robotic automation, and people like us who come in and say, yeah, but wait, what are these reports? We got them down to 20 reports instead of 200. Okay, now let's automate those, right? And that's the other piece to the AI is, oh my God, this is amazing. This could take everything, but let's use it in a direct fashion so it becomes even more effective, right? So those would be the two ads. I mean, there's lots to this question, but I think in adding to Clayton's comments and some of the other things, I think it's going to be fantastic if we can use that AI and the technology. But we have to kind of I don't know the right term is, carry it and carry the torch in a delicate fashion, because it could get pretty unwieldy and can be, I will be honest, probably misused in a lot of ways, which could be detrimental to what everyone's trying to do.
100%.
So, my add to that one.
Yeah, just maybe to change up a little bit, I think just continued focus on the importance of kind of human dynamics of what's happening in the workplace, right? That ultimately any change requires people to change, and that leading that is generally better than screaming at people or sending them an email, right? So whatever the tools might be, if AI comes and goes or whatever may come or go, right? There's going to be people involved for the foreseeable future, right? Until we get to Terminator or whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah.
But
Skynet.
But for now, I really feel like, in my experience, the things that I've been involved with that either succeeded very well or failed miserably, ultimately it really kind of came down to the people, which Kevin and Clayton, you've both mentioned the exact same thing, right? So I feel like that's a really critical part of it, and if I'm not aware of that, I'm probably doing everybody a disservice, especially myself.
Yeah. Something else to consider too as we go through this. Yeah, we can use these tools to ultimately help ourselves and help move our industry forward. But we've also got customers, clients that we're supporting that are also facing these new tools in their environment. How do I incorporate this into my process? What is this going to do for my industry? So we really have to be aware of not only the effects of these tools on us, but on the people that we support, and then help them go through the change management of rethinking their process, rethinking the way they do their business, and get results, and then be able to help them go through that change process. Absolutely.
I really like the frame of mind of thinking about AI as just a tool to help us be more effective humans, and not a surrogate human, right? I don't think that the AI, the computers will ever be able to really fully replace the work that we need to do, because of those interpersonal relationships and different kind of human factors that are inherent in our lives. But it's definitely exciting and interesting to see where this will go into the future, and maybe how it'll help us to maybe drive those timetables forward in a more progressive and expedient way. Right.
I think that's well said. Yeah, that the point of AI is not to have AI, right? The
Right.
point of AI is to help me make a decision.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right? And if it helps, that's great. If it doesn't, then I maybe look for a different tool. But ultimately, the goal is not that in itself.
Right.
Yeah. Great.
So carry that kind of topic forward. How can we advance the field of quality improvement? A lot of these methodologies were developed in the 80s.
Even further than
Not a
that.
lot of
Exactly.
going back further. Right.
Yeah.
But what can we do that's new? Where would we go? Where should we go?
Yeah, well, again, the older I get, I think I tend to go back on a few things. The reality is a lot of these tools have been around since the 20s and 30s,
Right.
20s and 30s. And the reason for that is because they work, right? So, sometimes going out and saying, well, what can we do different isn't always necessarily the best thing. What we need to be looking at is how do we engage people to use what we have now. Doesn't mean we shouldn't always continue looking forward. I don't want to make people think that I don't support that. But I find, at least in the work that I've done, not only within higher education, but within retail and airline work and all these other areas that I've had an opportunity to support, is people just don't use the tools. They don't use what we have, so they don't really feel there's a value to it, or they kind of say, well, we tried that once, but it didn't go anywhere. And so as we look toward the future, what I'm really seeing is not necessarily changing the tools as much as changing the mindset, really continuing to help people see that organizational improvement, OpEx, is not going to be an add-on. It's not something you bolt onto your job or do something temporarily and then stop doing it. That it has to be a part of everything we do every single day. And that mindset really still isn't there in a lot of industries. So promoting that, I think, is going to be absolutely critical in changing the way people think about it so that it becomes a natural part of everyone's job. Essentially going back to the total quality management concept. Quality is everybody's job. But not just quality, I think in this case operational excellence. So you really are going to have to do that in order to move things forward.
Well, I do it, and I just add into that. I mean, getting it to stick and resonate with people. Like, let's see, sales for organizations think it's manufacturing, right? So, that's actually Intel. Sales organizations like, well, I don't need this stuff. Let's talk about how I make better sales. Okay, how many calls did you make today? I made 100. How many calls did you get a sale? I got 2. So you have a 2% yield. Oh my God, that's manufacturing. Okay, so you got 2 calls that made a sale. Let's continue the conversation, right? So what if I could get you to 10% yield or 10% calls? Well, all right, let's talk about it, right? So potentially changing the conversation so that it sticks and that they're not so much looking at it as totally quality management. I'm in a manufacturing environment. It's like I'm just optimizing my job, whatever I'm doing, however I'm trying to improve the process. I think that's key. Being a dad, I'm your classic dad with bad dad jokes. Kids are like, we drive, we get a stoplight. Someone speeds off, and they're like, Dad, catch up to him. I'm like, they're within 2 standard deviations. I'll see him at the next red light. And then I get the big dad eye roll, like, all right, whatever, Dad. And I come up nice and slow. Hey, how's it going? They're right there at the next red light. And I try and teach that to the kids, not so they can talk and nerd out about standard deviations, but that they understand that the world is just a bunch of patterns, right? You can optimize and improve everything if you just maybe take a step back and try and relay it to them and say, okay, guess what? I'm going to see them at the next stoplight. It's okay. We don't need to get a ticket for it.
I kind of love these practical examples of the tools that we use.
Right.
Actually, funny story, I had a nurse that I had been coaching through a project for 8 months or so, and she ended up finding a passion for quality and shifted from her nursing role into a quality role. Separate story, but funny thing, she actually had some problems in her personal life and ended up doing an Ishikawa diagram for some problems she had in her own life, and she brought it to me and showed me, and I'm like, this is amazing how you're using these practical tools. So I really do think you're right. It's not necessarily about shifting the tools and practice that we have, yet it's about shifting the minds of the people that use them, shifting almost like human culture, really.
Yeah. You have that?
Well, I was just going to mention, similar to what you're saying about the tools, right? That I think it's easy for maybe people that are not in manufacturing to dismiss something that they think is too sciencey or too mathy, whatever it might be. But these tools are generally applicable everywhere, even in our personal lives, right? I can do a fishbone diagram.
Right.
I can do a 5 whys. I can do an FMEA.
5S your dishwasher.
Right.
I mean, you do C&E matrix and
Right.
what do you want to spend your finances on, even though you might get an argument with your wife, even though this webinar isn't about how you win decisions against your wife, that type of thing. But the tools are amazing. They're pretty clear.
And
My wife loves the tools.
Yeah, and I guess one specific thing that I was reminded of when, Kevin, you were talking about the 2 standard deviations, pulling away from the traffic light, that almost everything is a distribution, right? It's very easy and convenient for me to make a point estimate, and it'll probably be wrong, right? So how much of a distribution is there? How much do I care about that, right? Like if I'm within 2, I'm probably going to get to the next slide at the same time, so I should probably focus on something else.
Yeah.
And I think that for people that don't have a math or science background, it's difficult to kind of acknowledge and the consequences of acknowledging that everything is generally a distribution.
Yeah.
So that I know that's kind of specific, but I think that applies in lots of places.
I think that's a consistent gap that I see with the people that I'm helping to coach is the gap between their personal perception and bias towards something and the actual statistics behind it. You may perceive that as an improvement, but I'm going to show you that it's not. I'm going to show you that that's normal cause variation. We've seen that in the past. In fact, 6 months ago, we were lower than this rate or at this rate. It's not true improvement. So I think that that's a consistent thing to address is trying to bring people into that world of statistics and communicate it in a way that's easy to understand yet applicable to their own lives and the work that they do. I constantly hear, I'm not a statistician, don't give me that lingo, So I try to make it practical.
Yep.
And that's something I found in my own teaching is that you've got to make the concepts accessible. When I first started in this world, as far as process improvement, Lean Six Sigma, all that, it was there was a language that you had to know the secret handshake to be a part of that group. And even as I worked with clients, I started to buy into that. We're going to talk yield. We're going to talk about rolled throughput yield and that type of thing and how it affects us. And then people would glaze over. So over time, I really have become a very strong advocate for making it accessible to people. If that scares them, then we change it up. We make it something relevant to them to say, these are good outcomes, or this is going to be to the benefit of your customer. They buy into that just as easily. They don't need to know that we call it yield. And that, I think, is another way that we can help move things forward.
I think that's a great segue and maybe slightly addresses the first question we have from our audience.
All right.
So how do you describe what you do to someone who has never heard of Lean Six Sigma? Let's start here. We'll start with Patrick.
Okay. I think the simple explanation that comes to mind for me is that Lean is making sure that I do the right things. That I'm not doing something that's wasteful. And then Six Sigma, reducing the variation, right? So maybe something as simple as driving to the airport, right? If I want to take a certain route that's out of the way, maybe that's wasteful, right? And there's going to be variation, right? I might get a red light, there might be an accident, I might get a flat tire, that kind of thing. So I want to reduce waste. I want to take the best route, but then I still need to be aware that there's some variation there, right? If it's ultra critical that I be at the airport on time and I always leave at the average time it takes me to get there, I'm going to miss half my flights. Right, so what things can I do to reduce variation? If I get run flat tires, then I don't have to worry about getting a flat tire, something like that. So, essentially focusing what I should or shouldn't do, and then optimizing the things that I should be doing, which goes right back to what you were saying earlier, Kevin.
I like to take the Chandler Bing approach. I like people kind of wonder for Christmas and Thanksgiving, like, what do you do for a living? He does the Lean Six Sigma. I tend to actually ask them, have you ever had a cup of coffee? Right? Tell me the best experience of a cup of coffee and the worst experience, right? Well, the worst experience, it took forever, it was the wrong coffee, it tasted terrible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? These are all measures in my mind. I said, well, tell me about your best experience. Well, it was really fast, it was cheap, and it tasted perfect. I said, that's what I do. I make sure it's optimized, effective, efficient, and your quality is there, your cost is down. That's what I do with Lean Six Sigma. You want to learn more? Come to one of my classes, right? So that's what I try and do. I mean, I still leave them with question marks, right?
Yeah.
They still kind of walk away with I think he does efficiency stuff. But for me, all I want to do is to get my goal in that conversation is, when people ask me what I do for a living, I want them to just go, once, and then leave, right? That's all I need them to do. From there, we can talk, right?
And I essentially follow that same pattern that you do, and I even kind of what I did when I introduced myself at the beginning of this. I tell people that the work that we do is to help organizations do things better, faster, smarter, lower cost, and deliver a better customer outcome. Take it from where we are today to what can we really do to wow our customers.
Fantastic.
Love it.
Fantastic.
As a new green belt with no black belt mentor, what would you recommend to someone to learn, to grow, to be successful?
I wouldn't necessarily say that you necessarily need a black belt mentor. I mean, I know people that have been very successful without having that particular type of role in their lives. It never hurts to see if you can't find somebody.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you really want to have somebody who's a mentor that can help you, identify the people who have that skill set, and don't hesitate to reach out. I know when people have asked me, can you help me? Can you give me advice? Can you help me get things done? Absolutely. I'm more than willing to help. I don't know very few people in the industry that are not willing to provide that kind of support. But, again, if you are looking for a mentor and you can't find one, again, really going back to looking at the reading material, the books, the support materials that are out there can be very beneficial. And again, look for something that is clear, makes sense to you. But you don't even necessarily need to have a black belt mentor. You may just find somebody who's really good in operational effectiveness or leadership or management that can provide insights, because they're going to have picked up some of this type of stuff along the way as well. So they're going to be able to provide some insight. So they don't necessarily need to be a black belt specifically to provide that mentorship.
I'm glad you said that. I've definitely met a lot of green belts with a lot of experience who have helped me to grow in various ways. I also, through a process of informational interviewing, I've found black belts in unlikely places. I know a lot of our physicians at Mayo Clinic actually have a black belt certification, and they've done that work in maybe a previous life. I know one of the ICU doctors I work with used to be an engineer, and so when I go to talk to her, and she knows exactly what I'm talking about, found some mentorship through those kind of relationships as well.
So it sounds like this would be something that probably comes from someone who's trying to maybe do a Zoom class and get a certification, just kind of check the box. I would echo Clayton's comment on that, is if you don't have a mentor, it's not required. It's always good to bounce ideas off it. What I'd say is these guys are all my mentors too, right? And no matter how high you get up in Master Black Belt or King Poobah, whatever the certification term is next year, the reality is everyone's a mentor for you no matter where you're going. So try and find it out, especially if you're trying to do this alone on Zoom. The books are great, but LinkedIn's a great opportunity to say, hey, look, I saw you did this project. I'd love to learn more. See if you build it, because part of this is understanding how to work with people too. I think it'd be ideal if you can find one, at least to bounce some ideas off.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Find your people and find a place, a community of practice or whatever it might be that you can have those conversations. And yeah, I learn from everyone as well. Absolutely.
Definitely.
What they say, if you want a myriad of opinions, confidently post the wrong answer on the internet. And you can do that.
There you go.
Seriously though, you can actually go out to some of these forums too. Same thing, and just say, "Look, I need some help," and you will usually find some good support there too.
That's great. What improvements are you most proud of implementing in your work? Can you give us an example of a big impact change that have led or that you have led or supported?
Take that one.
Yeah, I can go for a fast one. So you'll probably hear lots of ROI conversations. I'll give a non-ROI one. In medicine, a lot of times profits, and especially in a nonprofit organization, you don't really want to talk about ROI. Heart transplant at Mayo Clinic had a lead time from when you get on the wait list to when you actually get the surgery. It was about 45 days. There was a subgroup of patients that have a congenital disorder that a lot of times by the time they talk to a doctor at day 23, they'd actually pass. So they actually were not making it to surgery because the congenital disorder would actually kill them in that sense. So talk about a sense of urgency, we need to reduce that. We actually reduced it down to 12 days. And one of the most remarkable things in my career, and it's what's fun about this job a lot of times, is you get a lot of these. Our heart director, Dr. Studley, took me into the OR during the surgery, and then he took me to the pulse stop to talk with the individual. Hey, I just want you to meet Kevin Ingholt. He does a lot of our process improvement stuff. Historically, a lot of times patients in your category, I don't see them after I see the first diagnosis, but we optimize the system. you can thank him for getting you into surgery on time. And my eyes blew up. Like, oh my God, like this guy just gave me credit for an opportunity for the kid to actually get a heart transplant in time. That was, to me, that makes you motivated to continue to work, things like that. And these guys will have similar examples of that. I mean, it's just fantastic. There was no money involved. It was about someone's life. That was pretty cool. I never thought that would happen.
Yeah, that's great.
It's funny you say that because I had really not considered it too heavily until you just started down that path. But I think that one of the biggest impacts that I've had is I've actually had a couple times people saying, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I was about to quit. I was about to change careers.
Yep.
This was driving me crazy. So there was a mental health aspect. People were highly anxious and stressed out, and being able to sit down and talk things out. Sometimes the best impact we can have is not necessarily, did we save X number of dollars or did we cut 30 seconds? It's the impact of what we have actually done. What did that savings do for somebody, or what did just spending time and having a conversation with somebody do to help them?
Yeah, absolutely. Just one, not as impactful as your example, Kevin, but one recent activity that we had, I got the chance to help with some process improvement events for a group at Intel. And basically just, they knew what they needed to do, but that outside perspective was helpful and allowed them to kind of free up some of that brain power of, maybe I can think less about the structure of what I'm doing and I can actually do the creative part that I need to do. So I think there's a little bit of a kind of a parallel to what you explained, right? That maybe as a practitioner I can help enable something, right? And that's ultimately what I want. I don't want to go in there and do something that blows up when I leave, right? I want to enable people to be successful well after I'm gone. So I think in general that applies with what we do.
I think it's all of these effects that we've had on the people that we're working with that help to continue and proliferate what we're doing, right? It keeps me going every day, I know that for sure. I have one of the nurses I work with brought me in on a project that helped to improve burnout after a code event. And just the discussions of vulnerability, being there for a huddle and seeing how vulnerable providers were being after the event, letting them know, hey, we're all still people and this affects us, let's talk through it. I can't tell you how much that's really affected me. So, all right, this is I believe our last question. What advice would you give to somebody who is just starting their journey in operational excellence?
For me, it would be, again, learn everything you can, take advantage of the classes that are out there, but more importantly, try stuff out, practice it, because this is stuff that if you don't use it often, it can get confusing, you can forget it, you can lose some of that, and there's so many different ways to apply it that you really have to gain experience. So as you're going through operational excellence, go out there, try these tools out. If they don't work, no big deal. It's not the end of the world. Try something else, but keep moving forward and keep developing your skill set.
I'll add to that. Definitely apply it. You start reading something about 5 Whys or 5S or some of these things. Again, I'm using coffee as the theme. Like you go in like, I wonder why they did it this way. I wonder why I did that way. With an asterisk, it gets addicting after a while. When you start really getting into this stuff and you start realizing how much you can optimize, my wife just tells me, like, stop counting the staff, stop counting your own timer on my own phone. I'm like, because it becomes like this one thing, like, well, they're overstaffed by 2 people. She's not paying attention. Your coffee's actually going to be wrong. You get a 50% chance that's going to be a defective coffee. And 1 in 2 chances my wife's got a bad coffee. Because I'm applying it and I'm excited to it. So I would say that would be a huge one. That's a great comment, Clayton. It's just, look, don't look at it as an academic exercise. Look at it as a life application, right? How do I use this in my life? And then it really sticks after a while.
Yeah. And just very briefly, I'd say try to surround yourself with people that are passionate about it too. Right?
Absolutely.
If I feel like I'm on my own, that makes it more challenging.
Fantastic.
First off, I want to thank all of you for coming today.
Yeah,
I hope we can connect again in the future because this has been a really great discussion. Maybe we just go out to dinner or something. That's going to wrap up our session today. I really want to thank the panel. I want to thank you for attending and for joining us today. We hope you found this webinar helpful and are excited to apply these strategies to your projects. To stay connected with us and to get updates on future webinars, please follow the ASU Engineering Professional Development page on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in exploring ASU's wide range of engineering non-credit programs, from Lean Six Sigma certifications to microelectronics to smart manufacturing courses, please visit us at asuengineeringonline.com. Thanks again for participating. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Thank you.